You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And at the end of this show, you're going to get the interview that I did with Lew Freedman, the author of the book on Johnny Vander Meer. It's always fun talking to Lew, let me tell you. But I have to start with some news involving my beloved Yankees. I'll start with the Mike Talkman trade. The Yankees traded him to the Giants for Wandy Peralta and the proverbial player to be named later. And I don't hate this trade, but I don't love it. I don't hate it because I knew it was coming. The Yankees soured on Talkman very quickly. He had the magical season in 2019 where he hits .277 with 13 homers and 47 RBIs. It looked like another heist, like Luke Voigt and Gio Urshela. Then last year, Talkman took a step back. He hit .242, didn't hit a home run, had 14 RBIs, and he got off to a bad start this year. Hit just .214, was behind Clint Frazier and Brett Gardner on the depth chart. You had a sense that the Yankees were open to moving Talkman. Having said that, though, I'm not sure how crazy I am about the idea of trading Mike Talkman. Here's a guy who's an excellent fielder, can play all three outfield positions. With the Yankees, he's only committed one error. In his entire Major League career, he's only committed two. I mean, do you remember in 2019, the home run that he robbed in Camden Yards? I don't remember who hit it, but it was an outstanding play. Talkman was playing left that day. He also gave the Yankees some speed. I understand that they have Brett Gardner and Tyler Wade, but Talkman may be faster than them. And with the extra inning rule, you need at least one guy with speed. If you're the home team and it's tied in the bottom of the 10th, and you've got a slowpoke getting ready to start the inning on second base, no, you pinch run for him. You try to win that game right then and there. Also, here's the thing. Are we sold on the Yankees outfielders? Outside of Judge and Stanton, I mean. I don't want to hear any criticism of Stanton. The guy's leading the Yankees in home runs and RBIs. And Judge has gotten off to a solid start. But besides them, Frazier's been dreadful. Hicks has been dreadful. Gardner hasn't been much better. Should the Yankees really be trading outfielders? If your point is that Mike Talkman was blocked, you're right. He was third on the depth chart in the outfield, there's no question. But maybe that shouldn't be the case. For a Yankees team that's looking for a spark, why wouldn't you try Talkman for a game or two? You've got to realize something. Clint Frazier is hitting 132. Aaron Hicks is hitting 153. I understand that Talkman wasn't putting up gargantuan numbers, but he was hitting 214. That is better than Frazier, it's better than Hicks, and it's better than Gardner. If you're going to make that type of a trade, you need to know for sure that your outfield situation is set. Do we know that? No. Do we know for sure that Clint Frazier is going to turn it around? Absolutely not. Do we know for sure that Aaron Hicks is going to turn it around? Definitely not. Do we know for sure that Brett Gardner is going to turn it around? No. What Brian Cashman has done here is he's put the Yankees outfield on death ground. And I don't mean that in the sense of if they don't produce, someone's ready to take their spot. No, it's the other way. Cashman has doubled down on these guys and has said, you know what? I believe that Clint Frazier is going to turn it around. I believe that Aaron Hicks is going to turn it around. I believe that Brett Gardner can be the sole backup outfielder. I'm not sure how much I believe in that strategy. You can't tell me that Frazier's a sure thing. Aaron Hicks has had a dreadful Yankees career. I know Cashman loves him. I don't know why. Brett Gardner I'm fine with. I have no issues with Gardner. But let me tell you, I'm selling Frazier stock, and I didn't have a lot of Frazier stock to begin with. And Aaron Hicks stock I never had, so I'm advising everyone to sell that. Now look, I'm not saying that Talkman, if he had been given extended playing time, would have duplicated what he did in 2019. But he deserved the chance. It's not like he was lost at the plate. He wasn't Jay Bruce out there. People forget this. He was slated to be the starting left fielder in 2020. Then the coronavirus happened. Then Clint Frazier had the great season. Talkman took a step back. I understand that that's baseball, but there is a little bit of me that really wanted to see what Talkman could do with extended playing time. Could this be Brian Cashman's way of trying to slap some sense into these guys? Hey, if you don't produce, you're going to be traded too. I'm not sure if Mike Talkman is the guy who you use to send that message. I'm not sure how strong that is. Everyone knew that Talkman was available. And I'll say this. We're less than a month into the baseball season. And Brian Cashman has already made 2 notable trades. It's not like he traded minor leaguer A for minor leaguer B. No, he's made 2 trades already that directly impact the major league roster. He traded for Rougned Odor, and he just traded Mike Talkman. That's very, very interesting. Now, I'll say this, Talkman does fit the Giants very well. As good as the Giants are, they have gotten no production from their outfield. Alex Dickerson has not gotten off to a good start. Same thing with a guy like Austin Slater, even though he has 5 steals. Mike Yastrzemski hasn't gotten off to a good start. Yeah, it makes sense for the Giants to look at a guy like Talkman and say, yeah, we think he can improve our outfield. Maybe not get back to what he did in 2019, but he'll certainly help us out. And I think he will. I think Talkman will do a good job with the Giants. I'm rooting for him. I like Talkman. As for the guy who the Giants traded in Wandy Peralta, he's another guy who just got squeezed out from the depth chart. The Giants have 4 lefty relievers. Jake McGee is their closer. They have Caleb Barragar, Jose Alvarez, and Wandy Peralta. You don't need 4 lefties in the pen. The maximum you should have is 3. I think I spoke about that when the Giants signed Alvarez. Out of those 4 lefties, Peralta was the worst one. He's 2-1 with a 5.4 ERA. Last year, he went 1-1 with a 3.29 ERA. He's not an awful pitcher, but he's not great. I'll say this. The sense I got from reading the reports was that the Yankees were just waiting for the right offer to present itself to trade Mike Talkman. Wandy Peralta should not be that right offer. It's not that he's a dreadful pitcher, he's not. It's just, how much does he really fit the Yankees going forward? At this very moment he does. I understand that Peralta is currently not on the Yankees' active roster, but if the Yankees wanted to put him on the active roster and send down Litke, I can understand that. But realize you're going to have Zach Britton coming back in the second half of the season. You have Justin Wilson, who's pitched well. I'm just not sure how much of an impact Peralta is going to have going forward for the Yankees. All in all, I'll say that the Giants won this trade. I know why the Yankees did it. Talkman was blocked. You've got a quality major leaguer that other teams want. So yeah, get an asset for him. But I'm not sure he should have been blocked. I think he had earned some more playing time. He fits the Giants very well. I'm not sure how well Peralta fits the Yankees. I'm not going to bang tables over this trade, but I'm not crazy about it from a Yankees perspective, that's for sure. The second piece of Yankees news is that it seems like Kyle Higashioka is going to be getting a lot more playing time at the expense of Gary Sanchez. Obviously, he got the start yesterday, played well, went 2 for 4, hit a home run, and he's off to a sensational start. He's hitting .320 with 4 homers and 6 RBIs. Yeah, this is the right decision. As much as I've defended Sanchez, you've got to give Higashioka playing time. He's earned it. At the end of the day, the pitchers like throwing to Higashioka more than they like throwing to Sanchez. The fact that Gary Sanchez can't catch Garrett Cole, the ace of the staff, a guy who strikes me as an easy pitcher to catch, it's not like he's wild or anything, is a bad look for the Sanchez. I mean, he's 2 for his last 28. Since April 2nd, he hasn't hit a home run. He's hitting 182 right now. Yeah, he doesn't deserve playing time. It should be Higashioka. That's the correct decision by Aaron Boone. But it does bring up the question. What are the Yankees going to do with Sanchez going forward? See, that's a tough question to answer. This hot start that Higashioka's had is not sustainable. He is not going to finish the season with a .320 average, a .414 on base percentage, and 50 home runs. That's not going to happen. So when Higashioka cools off, you're going to need a guy like Sanchez to step in. Nothing gets a guy out of a slump quite like taking away his playing time. When Higashioka comes back to earth, Sanchez will have a chance to reclaim the starting catcher job. And that's it. If he doesn't seize it right then and there, the Yankees are going to non-tender him at the end of the season. He may not even make it to the end of the season. We know that Cashman is aggressive this year. He may look to move on from Sanchez very quickly. Now, I'm not giving up on Sanchez. I think he can turn it around. Am I 100% confident in saying that? No. Let's put it this way. I'm not buying Sanchez stock, but I'm not selling it either. I mean, let's be honest. Do you really want Kyle Higashioka as your starting catcher of the future? Probably not. He's gotten off to a hot start. He deserves to be the starter for the foreseeable future. But we know this isn't sustainable. He's going to come back down to earth. And when he does, Sanchez will be there. I think he'll be motivated. He should have been motivated before, but this should definitely motivate him. And he'll reclaim the starting catcher job. Aaron Boone is doing the right thing right now in starting Higashioka over Sanchez. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens with Sanchez when Higashioka comes back down to earth. Alright, now I'll give you some NBA Valk talk. And please indulge me for a little bit, because I have to start with Nets Raptors. The Brooklyn Nets became the first team in the Eastern Conference to clinch a playoff spot. They're 1.5 games up on the Sixers. They only have 10 more games left to play. I mean, here's what was incredible about that win. Kyrie Irving did not play well. He shot just 3 for 13 from the field. He shot 1 for 5 from beyond the arc. Kevin Durant only took 7 shots. The Raptors did a great job of forcing the ball out of Durant's hands. But on the Nets show on Monday, I mentioned the supporting cast. The win yesterday was solely because of the supporting cast. Jeff Green was the high man with 22 points. Blake Griffin off the bench had 17 points. Joe Harris was 4 for 9 from beyond the arc. He had 16 points. Landry Shamet had 14 points. Mike James was in there in crunch time. You know what? He played really well. He had 11 points and 8 assists. Who would ever heard of this guy? I mean, it seemed like the Raptors had a great chance of winning. They forced Durant into only taking 7 shots. The Nets did not do a good job getting to the free throw line. Kyrie Irving had an off night. That happens. I'm not mad at it. It would seem like the Raptors would have a great chance of winning, but no. The supporting cast stepped up. Every Brooklyn Net that played, with the exception of Kyrie Irving, scored at least 10 points. Tyler Johnson had some big minutes, let me tell you. I thought the Nets did a great job in smothering Pascal Siakam. They made Fred VanVleet's life very difficult. Yeah, Kyle Lowry got his. Yeah, OG Anunoby got his. That's going to happen. They're really talented players. Kem Birch had a very impressive double-double, though. 13 points and 14 rebounds. That I wasn't crazy about, but if DeAndre Jordan had played, that wouldn't have happened. That was a really impressive win for the Nets. The fact that they were able to win with underwhelming performances from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and no James Harden, that bodes well for their chances going forward. I understand that it's against the Raptors, not a playoff team, but that formula that you saw, Durant being doubled and then kicking it out to the open shooter, that will work regardless of who's doing the doubling. I'll repeat what I've said a million times before. How are you beating this Nets team 4 times in 7 games? Moving on now to Mavericks Warriors. A nationally televised game that you could have turned off in the first quarter. That may have been the worst performance I've ever seen the Warriors have. They were down 36-12 after a quarter. They were down 62-29 at the half. At one point, the Mavericks had a 43-point lead. What are the Warriors doing? You have Steph Curry, a guy who's going to get MVP consideration. And you allow Luka Doncic to go berserk? I love Luka. I'm not knocking Luka, but my God, you've got to do a better job stopping him. He had 39 points in 28 minutes. That's the performance that you put out there when you're fighting for playoff seeding in a nationally televised game? That was without question the worst game of the Steve Kerr era. My God, do I feel foolish for saying they'd be the 2 seed in the West. I seriously said that. Now they're barely going to make the playoffs. I mean, my God. Kelly Oubre has been a massive disappointment. Draymond Green has not had a good season. He's been good defensively, but you got to do better than 6.5 points per game when you're playing 31 minutes per game. Okay, it's just that simple. I get that the Warriors are fighting injuries right now. Obviously no James Wiseman. Obviously no Klay Thompson. Obviously no Eric Pascal. But for God's sake, you can't have more games like that. Look, this is a good Mavericks team. It's a Mavericks team that's going to make the playoffs. And Luka Doncic can win a playoff series by himself. God only knows how much Porzingis is going to play, but Luka can do it by himself. You know, it was funny, I heard people saying that the Knicks definitely won the Porzingis trade. Porzingis is so blasted injury prone. The Knicks got 2 firsts for him, and they opened up the cap space. That resulted in them being able to sign Julius Randle. Randle was an all-star. He's the best player on the Knicks. The Knicks are going to make the playoffs. You've got a very strong argument for the Knicks having won that trade. I'm not going to say it definitively, but you've got an argument. But the bottom line is, the Warriors need to get their act together quickly. They cannot have more games like that. Nationally televised against a playoff team, and you lose by 30. If I was Steve Kerr, I would have broken everything in the locker room after that game. That's how furious I would have been. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And I'll start with Teddy Bridgewater being traded to the Broncos for a 6th round pick. What's also noteworthy is that the Panthers are paying $7 million of Bridgewater's salary for the coming season. The Broncos are only paying him $3 million. So the Panthers literally gave Teddy Bridgewater away. They couldn't get him off the team fast enough. This is a bad job by the Panthers, man, let me tell you. They really think that Sam Darnold is that much better than Teddy Bridgewater. They were willing to trade a 2nd and a 4th rounder for an upgraded quarterback. What they perceive as a massive upgrade. It's not. And yes, I'm excluding the 6th rounder. They traded a 6th to the Jets. They're getting a 6th back, so you can make the argument that they cancel each other out. But let me tell you, Teddy Bridgewater is not exponentially worse than Sam Darnold. In fact, I think that Bridgewater is better than Darnold. Darnold's never had a season where he completed 69% of his passes. He's never had a season where he's thrown for over 3,700 yards. What on earth is going on with the Panthers? They've really doubled down on Darnold. They cannot take a quarterback in the 1st round. Okay, just do not even think about it. I've heard the rumors that if Fields slips to the Panthers at 8, they could take him. No, you cannot do that. You've invested heavily in Sam Darnold. You've got to run with it. If you really think that Matt Rule and Joe Brady are offensive gurus, give them the chance to fix Sam Darnold. Let's see if it can be done. I don't think it can be done. And I'm extremely skeptical of Rule and Brady. I'm not giving up on Rule, but Joe Brady, I mean, my God. This guy was getting head coaching interviews. He was the offensive coordinator of a team that went 5-11. No way should that guy be getting head coaching interviews. But you know what? Let's see if they can fix Darnold. Let's see if Matt Rule and Joe Brady can fix Sam Darnold. I don't see it happening. But only time will tell. What I can't figure out, though, is how you think that Sam Darnold is a massive improvement over Teddy Bridgewater. That I can't get. And now you're giving him away to the Broncos. A team that I said could trade for him. This is a perfect move for the Broncos. They easily win this trade. Drew Lock is going to have real competition. I don't see them taking a quarterback with the 9th overall pick. I know that Adam Schefter said that they're not out of the quarterback market. I just don't see it happening. You have Locke. You just traded for Bridgewater. What's the point in adding a third quarterback? If you want to give Drew Lock the edge to being the starter right now, that's fine. But if throughout training camp and the preseason, Bridgewater outplays Locke, start Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater is not a bad quarterback. And I've said this before, I am extremely skeptical of Drew Lock's NFL future. I'm not saying he can't turn it around, but he did not inspire confidence in me last year. He led the NFL in interceptions with 15. I understand that Cortland Sutton was out for the year, but you've still got to do better than that. Teddy Bridgewater gives the Broncos a real fallback option at quarterback. They won't need to rely on guys like Brett Rippon and Kendall Hinton. What's also noteworthy is that George Payton, the Broncos GM, was with the Vikings when they took Bridgewater in 2014. They traded up to get him, as a matter of fact. This is a great move for the Broncos. They easily win this trade. And I think the Panthers are in for some tough sledding with Darnold on his own now. When Darnold fails, not if, when, you'll wish you had a backup like Teddy Bridgewater. The Panthers must have a lot of faith in P.J. Walker. Not that much better than Mike White, let me tell you. Moving on now to the Buccaneers, bringing back Antonio Brown on a one-year deal worth $3.1 million. The deal can go up to $6.25 million if Brown reaches all of the incentives. This is a great move for the Buccaneers. Tom Brady loves playing with Antonio Brown. He wanted the Buccaneers to sign him desperately. And when they did, the two of them developed instant chemistry. Brown had 45 catches for 483 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also caught a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl. Granted, it was a 1-yard pass, but still, it's a touchdown catch. That still counts. You take a look at that Buccaneers wide receiver core. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, and Antonio Brown. It doesn't get any better than that. Jason Light, the Buccaneers GM, has made a concerted effort to bring all the key pieces back from the Super Bowl run. And that is the right thing to do. The last guy to bring back was Brown. You can give Antonio Brown $3.1 million. That's perfectly fine. This is a great move for the Buccaneers. I didn't even know it was possible for them to be scarier than they already were, but they just got scarier tenfold. Alright, here's my interview with Lew Freedman. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined by a very good friend of mine who's been on this show twice before. You know him. You love him. It's Lew Freedman. Lew, how are you today, pal? Okay?
I'm good. I hope they love me. Is it only 2 other times? I thought it might have been 3 or 4. I don't know.
For my college radio show, you did
okay.
appearance, but for the Jacob Valk Show, it's only been 2.
Okay, so it was more than that with you, though.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All
right. Today we're talking about your book on Johnny Vander Meer. Very, very interesting guy. Obviously, he came up with the Reds in 1937. What circumstances led to him making his ML debut on May 4th of that year?
Well, he put some time in. He wasn't like 19 or anything, but he was ready to go at that point. He's a guy who the interesting thing about him, as much as anything, and you can tell from the title of the book, Lightning Strikes Twice, is he seems to be known for only one thing.
Yeah.
Pitching 2 no-hitters in a row in consecutive starts, which nobody else has ever done.
And no one else will ever do again.
No one's going to break it, because that would mean they would get 3. But it could get tied. But you know what struck me just the other day when Madison Bumgarner pitched a no-hitter in 7 innings?
Yeah.
I wonder if somebody will pitch 2 7-inning no-hitters with this.
That would be interesting.
Outlook.
Well, there's a little bit of a controversy about that because Major League Baseball doesn't count it as an official no-hitter.
No, in fact, it led me back to research that I vaguely remembered that in 1991 they changed the rules.
Right.
And they did away with no-hitters. They redefined no-hitters. And they took away no-hitters that people had lived with their whole lives.
Andy Hawkins.
And that was included Harvey Haddix.
Right.
And his 12 innings of perfect baseball, which is the only time it's ever been done, but he lost that game in the 13th.
Yeah.
And so they took that away. So the rule change was you had to pitch 9-inning no-hitter and basically finish with a no-hitter. So if you, but it seemed to me there had been, and I couldn't find it, there had been a couple rain-shortened no-hitters.
Well, the one that I remember was July 1st, 1990. The Yankees were playing the White Sox. Andy Hawkins threw a no-hitter, but what happened was the White Sox scored 4 runs in the bottom of the 8th. The Yankees made 3 errors in that game. So Hawkins, for a little bit, had a no-hitter, but because the Yankees got the loss, it didn't count. The White Sox obviously didn't bat in the bottom of the 9th, so Hawkins didn't pitch 9 innings. Do you remember that?
No, but I did look up and come across the cuckoo one with Jim Maloney.
Okay, that I don't know.
He lost one after 9 innings. Anyway, Vandermeer really just kind of was a guy on potential at the beginning of his career, and then he has those 2 no-hitters in 1938, the back-to-back no-hitters, and then he's the second coming, is what people thought. He's going to be Bob Feller. He's going to be, Walter Johnson. It's like overnight he's like got this reputation. And yet he really didn't live up to that either. He was good, but not a great pitcher for the rest of his career.
We'll get into that, I promise. But I want to ask you a few questions first. What was Vandermeer's relationship like with Bill McKechnie?
I think it was pretty good in the beginning. McKechnie wanted him. He saw room for improvement, and he worked him in spring training. And he made the team. That was a big deal for him to no longer be in the minors and made the team. Eventually, though, Vander Meer, after the no-hitters, he got hurt a little bit, and he found himself pitching in the minors. He found himself out of the rotation. He had a very up-and-down career that way, so I'm not sure what their relationship was really like at the time, but he was not the fair-haired boy that he had been because they needed other guys and then to step up and take over. So Vander Meer went from one of these clutch guys in the rotation, and then the next year, when they win the pennant, he's like almost a non-factor. He's not as important anymore. So I don't know. I never heard much or read much about him, moaning or anything like that. But he just, you've got a manager using the guys that do it for him at the moment.
Right.
So that was the strangeness of his career. Incredible highs, and then plummeting lows where he gets hurt.
Yeah, peaks and valleys.
Yeah, peaks and valleys for his whole career. He had an under 500 record, and I think, if you read the newspaper stories of when he pitched the 2 no-hitters in a row, immediately guys were writing that he was destined for Cooperstown.
Yeah.
I mean he only had like 8 wins, or something. But really, they were actually putting that in print a lot, like, next stop, the Hall of Fame kind of thing.
Well, could you imagine a young pitcher like Davy Garcia throwing 2 straight no-hitters? The New York media would be going nuts. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Oh, I think so. I think that's always the case. These days, just imagine if Jacob deGrom did it.
Oh, God. Don't put that out there. I hate the Mets.
I'm not a Mets guy either, and I think he's a very good pitcher, but I think he won one undeserving Cy Young.
I agree with you.
And I think that was part of the hype. That's why I used that example. And then, of course, the being in New York thing, it would be blown sky high.
Yeah.
But Vandermeer was pretty level-headed.
So can you lay out Vandermeer's bond with Frank McCormick, whose grave I've actually visited? He's buried not that far from my house.
Oh, okay. I think he's another underrated ball player.
Definitely.
I actually saw his name just recently mentioned as one of the guys who, deserves more consideration for the Hall of Fame. And it's borderline, I think. I think it's just not long enough.
I like the MVP, but I can't give him a Hall of Fame.
And and a batting title and a lot of RBIs and a lot of all-star teams. He's a really good player, more than most people remember. But not long enough. But not long enough. He needs that. He needed a couple more years to even be considered. But I was a bit surprised. I don't even remember where I read it. I was just scanning through some baseball story online, and his name was in there as someone to be considered. It was an interesting thought.
You know who the sabermetricians want to put in the Baseball Hall of Fame? And I know this is a hard left turn, but let me get your thoughts on it. Rick Russell.
Who?
Rick Russell. You remember Rick Russell? Former Cub, former Yankee. Yeah, he pitched in the 80s. Look, Rick Russell.
Oh, okay. I didn't pronounce his name now. He was an interesting case. He's quite the guy, but he's got more wins than a lot of people think.
He has 214 wins.
Yeah, I knew it was over 200, but he also had some very erratic years.
He was a 3-time All-Star. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, he had a good career, but not a great career, and not a Hall of Fame career.
Definitely not. So back to Vandermeer and McCormick. What can you tell me about that?
Well, all those guys used to there were so many more hunting and fishing guys in that era. And and Johnny Vandermeer did go out to fish after he pitched a second straight no-hitter. So he couldn't be reached by the media.
That's interesting.
He left the house early in the morning before they came to his house, and they came to his house. So, Anyway, I got to tell you, I don't remember much about the friendship between them, particularly as much as he was such a good player that when that they could count on him. If you were a pitcher and McCormick was at his prime, he was one of the key guys in the lineup. Guys like him and the Ernie Lombardi, for example.
It's funny. My next question is going to be on Lombardi.
He's quite an interesting guy, I would think.
Yeah, go ahead. Talk about Lombardi.
He was a great catcher. Did make the Hall of Fame eventually, but it took a long time for him to get in, and he was bitter for a long time that he wasn't getting the recognition. And, of course, even now you can read stories that come up when somebody goes through baseball history and talks about the slowest runners in the history of the sport. And more often than not, he's number one. And he still, and I mean, he's been retired for 70 years or something. And I mean, there was a story, and I think I put it in there, where he stole an unexpected base because nobody thought he was going to go, and he was just chortling about it. Because no one ever expected he would steal a base. His lifetime stats for things like hitting triples and stealing bases are remarkably low for the amount of games he played. And, they were always worried about him hitting into double plays in clutch situations, too, because he was so slow. He was a great hitter, though. I mean, he was a catcher who won a batting title, and there haven't been very many of those.
He won two.
Yeah, but very few.
Yeah.
I remember that coming up when Joe Mauer was catching, right? How rare it was, and all. But Lombardi, he was a great hitter. He was a clutch hitter. He was a very savvy fielder, and yet he took a lot of grief for one magnified play in the World Series, where it was forever murky what actually happened at the plate. Did he get knocked cold for a second or two? People didn't believe he really was out. But Joe DiMaggio was running through at the time, and it was in the World Series, and it was a very infamous play. And DiMaggio said, no, it wasn't his fault, but the blame stuck to him. And it gnawed at him for that one fielding play, and he actually blamed that for being kept out of the Hall of Fame. I don't know how much truth there is. But he did deserve to be recognized long before he was. But Lombardi seemed to be this. He also had a nose like Jimmy Durante, and sometimes they compared them. I mean, they really did. I think they got together once. I don't know if it happened more than once, but there was like in a pregame thing on the field or something, and they were jokingly analyzing the comparison between their noses. Something along those lines. And he was good-natured about that stuff, but he was very bitter about the fielding play and the delay in getting recognized for the Hall of Fame. Later in life, he tried to kill himself.
Is that right?
I mean, he I think his wife had him committed for his own protection to an asylum for a little while during that stretch because he was making threats and stuff. And I think he actually did try it once.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was sad that it came to that because because the guys that knew him and teamed with him, they all thought he was a likable guy, a good guy, a great player, a great teammate, all that stuff. But then, like I said, he got soured on things for a while. He actually was an usher or a press box attendant at Candlestick Park later in life for a little while.
Okay, that's interesting. That I didn't know.
Yeah, I think it was just like, a little job when he was in older age.
Do you think that Vandermeer made Lombardi look better or Lombardi made Vandermeer better? How about that? Let me hear.
That's a really tricky question because, on any given day, you don't know. But I will say that a lot of the newspaper accounts when Vandermeer pitched the two no-hitters were very, very favorable towards Lombardi calling brilliant games. Not as a general rule. I didn't really read much about him as every day calling Vandermeer's games, but there was a lot written at the time that because he caught them both about what a great game he had called that helped the no-hitters, and twice. I mean, so he did get credit for that. in which doesn't happen a lot when you think about it. A guy pitches an no-hitter. I mean, who was pitching when Baumgartner made it catching? Was that Buster Posey or not? I don't know. I mean, no, wait, he's not even with the Giants anymore.
Yeah,
he's with Arizona now. That's right. I can't tell you who was catching the other day. I don't remember. But at that time, those newspaper accounts, they did play up Lombardi, and McKechnie did too.
Okay.
Not just the sports writer. So he did get a lot of credit for being a wise man behind the plate on those occasions.
Talking to Lew Freedman, the author of Lightning Strikes Twice, Johnny Vander Meer and the Cincinnati Reds. So now it's time to go in depth on the no-hitters. Would you be able to describe what happened on June 11th, 1938?
He never expected to pitch a no-hitter, but the weird thing was that Warren Giles, who was the general manager at the time, dreamed it the night before. There's no reason to think Johnny Vander would ever pitch a no-hitter, but Warren Giles had a dream that Johnny Vandermeer was going to pitch a no-hitter. Go figure, right?
Hey, I mean,
I could have that dream, but I wouldn't expect it to be true the next day.
I was going to say, talk about omens.
Yeah. I mean, so it got attention. I don't even know if he would have told anybody, right? If he had dreamed it and he got shelved, right?
Oh, definitely not.
or maybe he would have as a joke on himself, right? But he did. He actually told them, and of all people, who was assistant general manager was Frank Lane, Trader Lane,
right?
And was his assistant at the time. And he said, and he sees him at the park, and he goes, "I slept restlessly last night. I was dreaming of Vandermeer pitching a no-hitter." Right, That's kind of what the attitude was. And then he goes out and pitches a no-hitter, and and next time he did not dream the second one. He did not do it twice in a row. Did not happen. So, most no-hitters, there's always something going on there. A guy pitches I never figured out the guys who pitched a no-hitter who said they didn't know they were doing it. You don't hear that too much nowadays.
Right.
But Cy Young said that on one of his games.
Okay.
He actually, the game was over before he had that. And then, Vandermeer said the same thing for a while. He said, "Gee, I had no idea of pitching a no-hitter, but that was of doing it." But it took a long time before he realized it. Then he got better and better, and it kind of dawned on him that he hadn't given up a hit. And he bared down,
Yeah.
He said, "I want this." You got guys who find themselves in those circumstances, and they realize it, and they go, "Oh, well, I got to get these last couple of guys."
So on 3 days rest,
yes,
Vandermeer started in the first night game ever at Ebbets Field,
which was supposed to be a big celebratory party for Brooklyn and the ownership and the team and everything. And in a way, he blows out the candles on their cake.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, nobody, of course, expects that Vandermeer is going to pitch another no-hitter. Fewer people think he's going to pitch a second no-hitter than ever thought he'd ever pitch one. And the whole situation, it was a big occasion. I mean, they had celebrities there. They're turning on the lights. It's like night baseball's the future. Then one of the conversation pieces afterwards was, did Vandermeer benefit from the darkness?
I was going to ask you about that.
I mean, the lights are not as good as they are now.
Right.
We know that.
I mean,
but I don't. So much happens in the course of a game, and it's so unpredictable. You can't really say that's what did it.
I mean, the one thing I'll say is Crosley Field got lights before any other ballpark, so Vandermeer probably had more experience pitching at night than any Dodger did. I think
not very much, though. There was very little.
Not a lot, but still, it's there. I think it's notable.
Didn't the Kansas City Monarchs beat them all to it?
I don't know.
They had portable lights. They would, when they were barnstorming, they would bring them along in a truck.
That I don't know.
Earlier than that. Earlier than, the first night game.
Okay.
And all. But, And then when I was doing the research for this, one of the weirdest things was learning that it was not broadcast on the radio.
Is that right?
Because there was a bizarre war going on in New York with broadcast rights between the Yankees, the Giants, the Dodgers, and not being allowed to broadcast certain games. And so Red Barber could not do the game. And then much, much later, he recreated it.
Was there a feed in Cincinnati?
I do not recall.
Okay.
I know that there was the problem, but I don't think there was a tape, though, until he did the recreation.
Okay.
But I was reading it, and I mean, you need a lot more information to really understand the dispute, probably, because it sounds so odd in these days. But anyway, he couldn't do the game. Right. So, which, we never think of it that way. What? He couldn't do the game, so.
I know. And
then you go back, though, even to the 60s and the 50s and stuff, and a lot of things like the Game of the Week and all those kinds of things, there's not a whole lot of tape of regular season games. They were, even if they were used by the network, they destroyed the tape and used them again or something.
Larson's perfect game for a long time, that was lost.
Yeah. You could find, the only thing you could find, it seemed like, was World Series tapes.
Right.
Those seem to be preserved, but yeah.
No one thought to save anything.
Yeah, nobody thought about it.
Right.
Now everybody saves everything.
I know.
There might be too much out there. Things you never wanted to see again.
Yeah, I was going to say. Talking to Lew Freedman, the author of Lightning Strikes Twice, Johnny Vander Meer and the Cincinnati Reds.
I guess you could say the no-hitters made Johnny Vandermeer's reputation, but they didn't make his career because everything is, what have you done lately?
Right. That's a good way of putting it. I like that.
Yeah, I mean
now whenever someone throws a no-hitter, it becomes, is Vandermeer going to have company? Is someone else going to do it?
Right.
No one will ever do it. No one.
Well, I can't say never to that. Like I said, my philosophy is they could tie it. A guy like Scherzer, and he used to follow Nolan Ryan to see if he was going to do it.
Oh, right, yeah. No, look,
he used to think that if anybody was going to do it, it would be Nolan Ryan.
Look, it's certainly possible that someone could do it again. I don't see it.
But when I say I don't see it, no one's going to break it. No one's going to pitch 3.
Not.
That is a never going to happen thing.
Right.
It's you got guys who do pitch 2 in a season.
Right, absolutely.
Not a lot. Again,
Allie Reynolds.
Allie Reynolds. There you go. Didn't Scherzer do it?
Scherzer, I think, did it.
I think so. And Nolan Ryan do it? Did Bob Feller do it in 2 in a season, or was all of his spread out?
That I don't remember off the top of my head.
Because I think he had like 4, right?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
And Ryan had 7.
Right. That no one's breaking. You put me on the spot here, Lou.
I don't think, well, yeah, I know my stats, but maybe I'm getting senile. I don't know. Yeah. I can't remember everything, ever. I'm getting too old. The head's too full. But I can see why Johnny Vandermeer in retirement would perk up when Nolan Ryan did it. Because there's the one guy you would think, if anybody's going to equal me, he is a threat to do it anytime he goes to the mound. So I could see why he thought that way.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Vandermeer wasn't the only good pitcher that the Reds had in the 30s and 40s.
No.
Can you lay out his relationship with Paul Derringer and Bucky Walters?
Those 2 guys, I learned a lot about those 2 guys researching this, and I became a big fan of Bucky Walters. Speaking of a guy who had a potential to be a Hall of Fame pitcher, if he hadn't started life as a third baseman before he became a major league pitcher and still won almost 200 games, won an MVP, I think won 27 games in a season, and won like 198 games, give or take. But he didn't become a major league pitcher, until he was well into his 20s when he was a .250 hitting third baseman. And somebody said, let's Let's give it a try. We think you can pitch. And so I was very impressed with him. You never hear about him.
No.
And Derringer was a guy who, at his best, was among the best in baseball, but had his seasons early on where he wasn't as smooth or overpowering, or when the team wasn't as good, he wasn't as good. He's not going to carry them, kind of thing. But when you had 2-3 guys together like that, they always had one other guy. Once in a while, it was Vandermeer. It was never quite the big three. Vandermeer was better when they weren't, or they would switch off or something. But somebody else would show up, like in a fluke, really. A guy like Jim Turner would show up one year, completely unheralded, 38 years old or whatever he was near the end of his career, and go 14-7. I mean, there was always one guy in that little stretch who really helped McKechnie, and that also held down Vandermeer when he wasn't at his best, or when he was injured and went back to the minors to start a season. They didn't need him as much. They basically won a pennant without him after he was supposed to be the next great thing. But there's no hitters because somebody else would pop up like that. So,
right.
And they always said McKechnie was a great handler of pitchers. If you pitched for McKechnie, you got better, which is a pretty good reputation to have as a manager.
And a well-deserved one for McKechnie.
No and what he won? Did he win pennants with 3 teams and World Series with 2? I think it was.
He won pennants with 3 teams. That is correct. And
and then but series with 2 maybe.
Right, Pirates and Reds.
Yeah. So I mean, he obviously knew what he could do with the material too.
Definitely.
And he did have that reputation. I always read. I mean, there's a quote that I know I read, and it's probably in there somewhere, where it says, "If you can't pitch for Bill McKechnie, you can't pitch for anybody."
Right.
Because he was always taking care of guys. He really worked with them in spring training to make them better, and he could look at their motion and think of what they needed. I mean, it wasn't a ton of personnel studying every pitcher at the time. Those were thinly staffed staffs, so to speak.
Right.
The coaching staff had, a couple of guys? And not 6 or 7, and minor league pitching experts and roving instructors.
I don't even know if those Reds teams had a designated pitching coach, did they?
That's what I'm not sure. They had guys who, some years, they would do it. But look, I mean, even Jimmy Wilson, the catcher?
Right.
He was a pitching coach at one point, and they activated him. He started playing again and had a couple big hits in the World Series.
Hank Gowdy, too, was a coach for him.
Right. Yeah, so, I mean, the pitching coach might have been a catcher in some cases. And we know later Jim Turner became one for a long time.
Right.
Yeah. It seemed like he was like a pitching coach till he was 90, but I don't think that's exactly true. But he was around for a long, long time. And,
right.
Didn't he? Wasn't he on a lot of Yankees championship teams?
Yeah.
That was later, of course, after he retired. But I didn't know much about his pitching career. I knew more about him being regarded as a pretty special pitching coach. I still think the greatest pitching coach of all time is Johnny Sain.
You can make that argument. So, would you be able to describe the 1939 Reds?
That was a big deal in Cincinnati because the Reds had been bad. In fact, Warren Giles was a big fan of Bill McKechnie's work elsewhere, including in the minor leagues. And he always said if he had a chance, he would like to hire him as a big league manager. And McKechnie was managing the Boston Braves / for a few years they were called the Bees. They got over that. And he was actually improving them, but then he made him a big offer that they couldn't match financially. And he was the guy he wanted to build his terrible Reds team into a good Reds team, and he did it. And they pulled it off in 1939. They had a big parade. The fans loved it. this was like the rejuvenation of the, they've always loved their baseball in Cincinnati. There's no question about that.
Right.
And I think I remember the newspapers having headlines like the end of the war, when they win the pennant, that kind of size headline. But also that, parades and things through downtown. And the fact that, this was the greatest thing. I think they said it was the biggest outpouring of people dancing in the streets since the end of World War I. In 1939. So, and it just whetted the appetite of the players and the team and McKechnie to come back and do it again, which they did. And then, and they ended up with one World Series out of 2 shots, so that was good.
What can you tell us about the 40 team? I mean, that was obviously the better team, but what can you tell us about it specifically?
Well, that was the strange season. We had Willard Hirschberger that year, right?
Yeah. We're going to get into Hirschberger. We're going to get into Hirschberger in a minute.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so it was not a completely free ride, I guess you could say. There were ups and downs. But, the core of the team was the same. The key guys, I mean, there were, you had a Vander Meer, you had a Walters, you had Derringer still on top, you had Ernie Lombardi and McCormick, and they were tough. They were a good team. They had guys who were less well remembered, who were very solid ball players. It's funny, I've done some, interesting baseball research over the years, and I read up on guys who were you kind of never have heard of from 90 years ago on teams that are not your team where you grew up, so you don't know them, and they batted 306 times.
I know.
And I think, whatever happened to those guys? How come nobody remembers them? They were pretty darn good, There's a guy like that with the Detroit Tigers named Bruce Campbell, who was very good. Guys like that. I mean, we don't know who they are.
I haven't heard Bruce Campbell's name in years.
Well, he came up in a research thing because he was one of those guys. I was reading it, and it was like, I didn't know about this guy. He made all-star teams. He hit 300 a whole bunch of times. And some of these guys had lifetime averages of 310 and stuff. They might have had shorter careers,
Right.
But not all these Reds guys. I mean, they were, infielders but there were 270 hitters who didn't make mistakes and made some all-star teams. They were pretty good. So, but we just don't know who they are because you don't remember everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad that some of these guys have been lost to history. It really is.
Yeah, there's like one of the pitchers on that 1940 Reds team was a guy named Joe Beggs. Does he mean anything to you? No. 12-3.
Unreal.
And his earned run average was like 2.00.
Yeah, Beggs was a very good reliever in an era where you really didn't have good relievers.
That's right. You're thinking, there were guys, and of course overshadowed, even though he had more fame a few years earlier, but that now with Cincinnati, was a guy like Wally Berger.
Yeah.
I mean, Wally Berger, had 5, 6, maybe really good years. Not a Hall of Fame career, but he got a lot of attention, of course, for his rookie record of home runs with Boston. And when they were playing in the park, that was my college football field. Before it was remodeled into my college football field, Braves Field. But yeah, but he had some good moments for them, guys like that. And I got the sense McKechnie was a pretty solid manager who knew how to use his guys and take advantage of the skills they brought, the diversification of their skills.
No question about that.
And even he, when you think about it, was not that famous a manager to the current day people.
Right. No, absolutely. You could go up to 99% of baseball fans today. They wouldn't know who Bill McKechnie was.
That's right. And he's in the Hall of Fame.
I know. It's so sad. It really is.
Well, how about the other McCormick? Mike McCormick was a rookie. No relation to Frank, and he batted 300. He was a good, he had a 10-year career. He was a good player.
More people will remember the former Yankee Mike McCormick than the Reds Mike McCormick.
No, he's not remembered. Well, they don't even remember Frank, and he was better.
Right.
That's what I would say anyway.
Talking to Lew Freedman, the author of Lightning Strikes Twice, Johnny Vander Meer and the Cincinnati Reds. So now it's time to get to the saddest portion of the book. How much was Vander Meer shaken by Willard Hershberger's suicide midway through the 1940 season?
The whole team was shaken. This was an astonishing development. A friend of mine who also writes baseball books, actually read this over the weekend. And one of the things he said that I didn't recall for sure was that he was the only one who ever committed suicide during a season. I do remember.
At least intentionally.
Yeah. I do remember in the early part of the 1900s, the Red Sox manager killed himself coming out of spring training. And Cy Young took over as manager for like 6 games or something.
But more recently, Tyler Skaggs just died of an accidental drug overdose. But again, it was accidental.
Right. And I mean, and I'm sure I know there's other guys who did in retirement. And
right.
So I didn't remember hearing that specifically, but what we're talking about is a guy who was the backup catcher to Ernie Lombardi, who didn't play a ton, but he was very useful in doubleheaders, especially when Lombardi had bad knees, and especially when he had an injury. And he was hitting about 300, but he came from a family, but he clearly, if he lived in another time later, he probably would have been diagnosed with a mental illness or depression and probably been on medication. He never had that kind of treatment, never had that kind of, examination. He just went along. But during the course of the season, the triggering incident that set him off on a road trip from when it led to him committing suicide doesn't even seem like much. He blamed himself for calling a pitch that an opponent hit that won a game that wasn't even a consequential game at the time, and he couldn't stop haranguing himself. And this was in public. So, like, his teammates were hearing him do this for a few days, and they kept saying, get over it, don't worry, it was one game, we're doing great, we're in first place, And he kept beating himself up over it. And it got to the point, I think he went to a drugstore and tried to buy a poison, and he couldn't get it or something. Then he decided he wanted to kill himself with a sharp razor, and he didn't have one, so he had to go get one. He was going to go buy one. He was really determined, and then he was so depressed, it was obvious to the leadership of the team, and McKechnie took him aside and had a long heart-to-heart conversation with him in the hotel room, took him out for a steak or roast beef dinner, when he said he was feeling better. And the next day, he refused to go to the park when all the buses, the cars, and all the people were taking their transportation. And then they realized, at the beginning of the game, he's not here. And he had stayed behind in the lobby. Everybody had seen him in the hotel lobby. And, he said, I'm waiting for a friend. Well, they all left one by one. And then finally they were all gone to be on time. And then they were at the park. And that's when there's a little bit of a alarm going off in McKechnie's head based on the night before. And he sends a friend of Hershberger's back to the hotel to check on him, and they ended up he slit his throat in the bathroom and killed himself. God. And they find out before the end of the game. The guy goes racing back to the ballpark and tells McKechnie, but nobody else.
Okay.
McKechnie says, I'm going back to the hotel. I'm leaving right now. And I don't know whether it was Gowdy. I'm trying to remember who it was, who he turned the team over to, who was coaching at the time, and said, don't tell the guys till after the game. So he goes back to the hotel, and the police are there and everything. And then they all and then the team comes back shell-shocked. Vander Meer, Walt, everybody. And they just thought he was a good guy, and they didn't... who was the third baseman at the time? Who lived to be almost Bill Werber, right? Isn't it Bill? Yeah, he lived to be almost 100 too. He was the closest to him on the team, and he'd had breakfast with him, I believe, too. had gone out with him the night before. One of the sports writers, I might have joined them for breakfast too. And, they just felt terrible about this, shocked beyond belief. They had a meeting in the manager's hotel. It says room, but it could have been a suite because they put a lot of guys in there. It's pretty crowded. Talking it over, just venting, explaining their feelings. Guys are crying. McKechnie's letting them work their emotions out. Right then and there, they vote to, if they win the World Series, to give Hershberger's mother a full World Series share. All this stuff, and it hangs over them, for a while. They actually, they didn't take days off really. They went back out and played, and they were a little shaky on the field. You don't know when you play every day if that affected the first few games, but they didn't play well right away. And then those days passed, and they went back to being the team they were and, becoming winners again. But it was a horrible nationwide attention-getting thing because those things do not happen. People think, why does a professional athlete want to kill himself, But he's like anybody else. The emotion.
Depression hits everyone.
Yeah, that's really what it was. It was showing he was human and he had the same emotions. But again, I think that's, you're talking about a time period where mental illness and depression was not dealt with in the same kind of manner or addressed and treated with medication and things. Or warning signs were not maybe read as thoroughly, but in this case, at least the day or so before, they were read. There was definitely worry about him.
It just wasn't to the point of we need to make sure that this guy doesn't do anything drastic.
Yeah, they were the people in charge who were worried about him were alarmed when he did not come to the stadium.
Did they know then that he had done something stupid, or
no? But they feared it. That's why they sent this friend back to the hotel.
I think it was Gabe Paul, actually.
What's that?
I think it was actually Gabe Paul, former Yankees GM.
No, it was a friend from Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
Gabe Paul was around, but he was not the one who went back to the hotel. He was a guy who was more of a Hershberger friend, but was known to the team and was making the road trip. And he was able to get back into the clubhouse during the game to tell McKechnie. But there were people. What they wanted him to do was to. They were ready to give him a day off when they found out that he hadn't come. But everybody had seen him in the lobby, and everybody assumed he was going with somebody else. And then they called the hotel room and asked, "Hey, what are you doing?" They said, "You don't have to play in the game. You could, if you don't feel well," which is what he was saying. Come to the park and sit in the stands, because they wanted him nearby, not alone. But in between, he had already made up his mind, and in between is when he did it. Between that phone call and the time that the friend discovered his body.
So, on a happier note,
which was pretty much the whole rest of the story. That was a happier note.
Yeah.
It had to be, right?
Definitely. Can you lay out Vandermeer's incredibly dominant stretch from 1941 to 43?
Yeah, it was like he was living up to the potential that he had shown in 38. And the irony of it being he was pitching his best when they didn't have the same level of team and guys were going. They had just won 2 pennants in a row where he had not been a super major contributor. And then, of course, World War II breaks out, and guys are going into the military left and right. And the team was weaker. Nobody was the same. In fact, you being a Yankees fan, I always figured they would have won another couple in a row after their blitz through the late 30s if it hadn't been for World War II, if everybody hadn't gone off to war and stuff like that.
DiMaggio, Berra would have been up sooner.
Berra would have been up sooner, right? There were all kinds of guys like that. So, the only way they could break up the Yankees was have a world war.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's roughly what happened. I mean, it was as as they say, was it 44 when the Browns won their only pennant? That
only in World War II could Pete Gray play in the majors.
Right. even if you admire what he did, it's still true.
Right.
Being the one-armed outfielder and thing. On the other hand, we did have two one-armed pitchers. Do you know who the second one is?
Jim Abbott threw a no-hitter.
Well, everybody knows Jim Abbott, but hardly anybody knows the other one because he was somebody I knew personally.
I couldn't tell you.
Chad Bentz. Look him up.
I'm sorry?
Chad Bentz from Juneau High School in Alaska. Same situation as Abbott. Only his career was much shorter. I think he was lifetime about 2-1.
0-3.
Or something like that. Okay. Very short, though, major league career. But he made the majors with the same handicap.
So Vandermeer couldn't stay away from the service forever.
No, it looked like he was going to.
Yeah, I mean, as the war was coming to an end, that's when he enlisted in the Navy. What can you tell us about his time in the Navy?
Well, it's interesting that some guys were in that situation. I never could figure it out how guys, for one reason or another, if they said they wanted to serve, they didn't take them, and then they did take them. I guess they needed more manpower. I mean, it's how it was. Sid Luckman, the great Bears quarterback, was like that, and played for the Bears all through the 40s and leading them to championships. And then he did it on weekends when he was in the Coast Guard. So his story reminds me of Vandermeer that way, but he couldn't. So I mean, we know how disruptive this was on the world stage, the amount of people dying all around the world, the devastation. I mean, baseball didn't really matter the way it did. You've got you've got guys like that who would go off in the service and give them. They didn't fight at the front like Joe DiMaggio, but they would give morale talks, right?
Right.
Stuff like that. Joe Louis was famous for that as the heavyweight champ at the time too, and some did fight. I mean, Ted Williams, of course, as a pilot. So I mean, for a while there, I guess Vandermeer in a way benefited from the thinning ranks, because he was able to get his act together and play well again. But then he did miss 2 seasons. And he was 31 when he came back, which is not too old, but he wasn't the young guy with potential that everybody was talking about, a guy on the way up. He was a guy who was still trying to have a career. There were guys who never did come back from war, who either were wounded or lost their stuff or something. So it was no done deal that just because you were released from the military, you were able to come back.
Right,
but he did.
Right.
He did. And but really he is starting to be on the downside of his career, after World War II, and the Reds had already peaked too, The team was no longer the same, there were a few holdovers, but it was a different group of guys. It was a different atmosphere. They had their moment, I guess you could say, So he was just happy to play at that point, I think.
Lou, I always love talking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Jacob.
That was Lew Freedman. His book is Lightning Strikes Twice, Johnny Vandermeer and the Cincinnati Reds. Thanks for listening. Here comes the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. It does mean a lot. Tomorrow is obviously the first round of the NFL draft. That morning, I'm going to give you a New York Jets draft preview. I'm going to tell you what the Jets should do with their 10 picks in a perfect world. Obviously, you'll get a regular episode of the Jacob Valk Show in the afternoon. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that if I'm going to write a sports column, I have to start smoking cigars and wearing clothes that don't match.